Hey, in this video I thought I'd go through what's just got to be one of the great songs of all time, The Doors' The End, and look at some of the stuff that Robbie Krieger, the guitarist, is doing. There's really an interesting kind of theoretical basis to the stuff he's doing. The actual notes that he's playing and the licks, they're not that hard, but the way he puts them together makes for really that classic hypnotic, trippy, really cool sound that he gets. So a couple things just to get us started. First, how to tune the guitar. Drop the low string down to a D. So we've got D, A, D, G, B, and then I think it helps to drop the high E also down to a D. You can get by with it at the E, but I think it makes it easier to fret and to finger some of these chords and riffs that we're going to do if you drop it down. Now, if you drop it down, both of the E's to D, and then you finger the basically partial D shape, get the A and get the D, and just strum that. What you've got is D, A, D, A, D, D. A chord with just D and A in it is what people will call a D5. It's leaving out the 3. That's kind of familiar to lots of heavy metal or rock music, has lots of use of power chords. But this is doing it in the open shape. Now what's significant about that is, by leaving the 3rd out, this basic foundational chord is silent on basically whether the song is major or minor, because it's the 3 of a chord which determines whether it's major or minor. When it comes to a D, whether you've got the F sharp or whether you've got the F is what makes it a D chord or a D minor chord. But by leaving out the 3, as I said, that chord is neutral. What that does is it allows Krieger to build on top of it riffs that are built on the D major, but also riffs that are built around minor scales. And we'll talk about which minor scales he's using. But it's that combination of the D5, then major riffs and these minor riffs that are partly to explain the kind of exotic sound that you get, whether you want to call it Middle Eastern or Indian flavor that the song has at times, along with the more familiar rock portions of it. Another way to bring that out is if you listen to the keyboardists often in their live performances, Manzarek will often play just a D5 on the keyboard while he's waiting to see what Krieger does, because by playing that D5, whether Krieger does something, a riff in the major or a riff in a minor, they're both going to be compatible. And it's useful, in fact it's quite instructive to listen to and watch on YouTube. You can find tons of different live versions, because then you can really get a sense for the different riffs that he uses and the different priorities he gives, which ones he really cares about, which ones aren't as important, and see how he shakes them up. Because their live versions, they're all different. They're not just playing the studio recording when they went on tour and played live. And not just because of Morrison's improvisations, but because of Krieger's choices as well. Final point, sort of by way of introduction, is if you ever look at some of the videos, Krieger finger picks, but he gets a really sharp, clean sound. And the way he gets that is, he's actually, if you ever look at the videos, he's got his fingernails grown out quite long, and he's got them filed into almost little triangles so that he can use them as picks. And I guess you can try to simulate that with some banjo picks for your fingers. But that's how he gets that really clean, crisp sound, even though he's finger picking. All right, so let's look at some of the theory that underlies it, and then we'll look at some of the riffs that get used. All right, so let's just start with basics of a D major scale. So we got the 1, the D, 2, E, 3, F sharp, G, 4, 5. 5 is going to be A. Then 6, B, 7, C sharp, and then our octave. Those notes of the major scale are what's going to figure into the riffs that he does on the low strings. So things like So D, because we've dropped it down, this is F sharp, A, there's C sharp, D again. And the song is basically just going to be a series of compilation of different riffs. And as I said, depending on which version you listen to, he changes the order, he shuffles them around, he emphasizes some riffs over than others. So really the idea about playing the song is get that stockpile of different riffs, and then if you want to play the version of the album version, you listen to that and you get a feel for the order, or you just kind of make the song your own by shuffling around the different order of those riffs. So we got those ones built around the major scale. How about the minor? Well, let's start with just a full minor scale, what people call melodic minor. So D, E, F, flatten the 3, G, A, B flat, C, D. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, octave. Now that full minor scale has a flattened 3, a flattened 6, and a flattened 7th. That's our C as opposed to our C sharp. Now what's interesting is that you can retain that minor feel by flattening the 3, but you can play with and change what you do with the 6 and the 7th. So for instance, if you keep the 3 flat, so you play the F, but you use the flat 6 and a plain old 7th. So our flat 6, our flat, would it be our B flat here, and the plain old 7th. So instead of flatting the 6 and flatting the 7th, we'll keep the flat 6 and we'll do a regular 7th. That's what's known as the D harmonic scale. So let's just see how, or hear how, that playing around with the flattened 3, but keeping the regular 7th, that is the C sharp and the F, how they work together to make for the sort of distinctive sound of the song. All right, so. So all I'm doing there is just a pull off from a D to the F sharp. Now because we've dropped the high E down to a D, this is now the F. So I think there are a couple things going on that make that sound so distinctive. One is simply that he's moving from a D down to a C sharp. If you listen to a lot of rock music, you're used to hearing flattened D, because that is flat 7th, which is the C note, not flat D. Flat 7th, which is the C, as opposed to the C sharp. So you'd have a C instead of a C sharp. That interval, that half step, it kind of sounds exotic if you've listened to nothing but rock music. So we've got the regular 7th, and then we've got that flattened 3. So it's kind of a combination of major and minor. It's what's known, as I said, as the D harmonic. And the other thing that sort of adds to the hypnotic feel is that kind of finger picking where we're using the D and the drone sound that we've got in different octaves. you one other thing that you can do with that minor scale, another variation. We had talked about flattening the 3, the 6, and the 7th. We got the harmonic minor by keeping the flat 3, the F, and then what we did was we kept the flat 6 and we used the regular 7th. But you can alternate it. That is, you can flip it. You can use the 6, which would be B, and then you can use the flat 7th, which would be C. If you do that, then you've got so again, flat 3, plain 6, and flat 7th, in which case your notes would be D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. In other words, the same notes that are in the C major. And that's kind of one of the ways to understand modes. That's the Dorian mode. All right, now the point of going through that business about the D Dorian was that it's going to be the D Dorian that Krieger uses through the verses. But as I've been trying to bring out, the song is built around basically a number of licks. And we basically now have the stockpile of licks. We got the runs off of the major, then we've got the stuff that's built off the harmonic minor, and when we get to the verses, we'll see the D Dorian stuff that's at work. Now, when it comes to the verse, I think Krieger is essentially, for the most part, just following the melody, doing single notes. Sometimes it's easier to hear what's going on if you listen to some of the live versions as opposed to just the studio album where the keyboards are quite prominent. So let me just walk through what I think he's doing. I think it makes sense to break the verse up into two halves. The first half, he's going to be working off the low notes, and then the second half, he'll be working off mid-range and the higher notes. All right, so as I said, think of it as, if you want, the notes of D Dorian, which is really the same notes as the C major. So basically all naturals we're going to work off of. So this is the end, beautiful friend. So we go back to that little lick that we were doing before. This is the end. So we were just doing A, B, and C up to D, and then back down, and then we change it up to B, C, D. I'll never look into your first part on the low notes. Now we're going to move to the second part with the high notes. Alright, so once we go through the first verse, and we go back to some of the licks that we were doing before, then we get a short lead break. Now this is just going to involve walking up and down the B string of the notes of the D major scale. So we're going to have D, E, F sharp, G, A, and then a chromatic. B, back up to a C sharp. And here's a C. It gets bent up to a C sharp. Now, when he does that in the actual song, say the studio album, he does it much more quickly, and he's also making it a little bit more complicated because he's got the high D that he's using as a drone, along with that kind of sliding solo that he's doing. Now, in some of the live versions, the solo he's doing is basically just going to be a bunch of pull-offs up and down the neck using those same notes. Sorry. Now after that solo, we go into the long verse. It starts with, lost in a Roman wilderness of pain, and all the children are insane. That sort of long speaking, singing combination verse he does. That's going to be basically just using the licks that we were talking about before. There are a couple of different ones that he throws in, just variations, a little bit, something like essentially just working with the raw materials we had before, moving back and forth between that, the harmonic minor and the major scale. Eventually the song builds and we get up to a kind of frenetic part where the bit of soloing that he does up very high is really just going to be arpeggios up at the 14th fret, and what we're going to have is essentially using the full shape of D, which would have us with a E here. That would be with an F. There's an F sharp, and there's a G. And I think he's just going to be basically moving back and forth. Play around with that just to get the feel that he's going for, it kind of dissonance, kind of chaos that goes with Morrison's wailing at that point. So then we go back to, again, some of the licks that we had before, and then the song starts to pick up its pace, and Morrison starts doing some ad-libbing. Eventually the guitar comes in, I think with something like a D5 around the 5th. And really 2 guitars I think come in at this point. And we get that frenetic, high-pitched stuff we were doing before. And then, I think really the last significant guitar move is going to be, get that D on the 3rd string, mute the B string, get the high D to ring, and then slide it up the D major scale again. Then bring in various distortions and then the song just wraps up with Morrison quietly singing, "This is the end," and then we're back to those licks from the very first verse that we had talked about. And that's the way the song basically ends. Alright, so lots of different pieces. Hope that's been of some use. Definitely a song that got to practice all the different parts, try to get a feel for it. But hope that gave you some stuff to work with. All right, take it easy.